Okay, welcome everyone to another exciting edition of the Magic Sandwich Show. We're coming to you live on YouTube and also hopefully on Vaughan TV. Somebody please give me a quick thumbs up that I can be heard. It looks like it. Yep, there we go. Show number 128, if such figures are to be believed, and it's a joy to welcome to the show the Rumpus and also Hogtied Champ. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Or good afternoon.
Is the case?
Yeah, sorry about that. I apologise for the late start. For once, it was a technical issue that had nothing to do with me. I was all set to go at 8 o'clock, but then other people had issues. And also, I understand that the last show caused a certain degree of controversy on YouTube.
A rumpus.
And a rumpus, yes. And I've not seen or read any of the comments about it, but I understand that Thunderfoot made a video mainly addressed to Aaron Ra about his comments relating to feminism, which we'll come on to in a moment. So I found out this just before 8 o'clock. They're both live on Skype. So I've sent a message to both of them saying, do you want to come on and join us? Neither of them have got back to me yet, but you never know. Some stage in the next 2 hours, they may well do. So I haven't seen what Thunderfoot was saying. Does one of you? I think both of you have actually seen the video. Do you want to? One of you talk us through it?
I don't know that Thunderfoot actually says anything in that video. I'm going to watch it. I mean, I didn't really watch it intently. I like how Thunderfoot takes video clips and then he normally integrates them and has his own editorial or polemic observations to put on top of it. And that's generally why I watch Thunderfoot videos. My recollection, and Rumpus, I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, he didn't actually put any commentary on this one. It was a, what's the phrase? Res ipsa loquitur? It was. He just showed some video clips of Aaron speaking.
Res ipsa loquitur. Is that what you said?
Is that? No, it wasn't. But I tried to.
Yeah, well, don't.
It was a valiant effort.
It's got nothing to do with. I suppose it kind of does. The literal translation is the thing speaks for itself.
It speaks for itself. I should have just said that then. I should have said, instead of trying to be fancy, I should have just went with the one language I'm moderately competent with. Yeah, he just took a bunch of video clips and said, look, this is Aaron saying something, this is some other people saying stuff, and the audience is left to infer from the evidence provided that, I don't know, crazy things.
Yeah,
Rumpus, you've seen
a more candid retelling.
Yeah, I believe you've seen it and have got some observations that you want to make on it.
Yes, I mean, along with the comments, I didn't want to be too confrontational with Aaron Ra on the program because I don't know the guy very well and I didn't want to sort of get aggravated with him. But the comments were that he was sort of interrupting everybody and he made this fallacy from definition. Basically, he was saying, and Thunderfoot sort of kept on the running theme through that video that he did was that Aaron Ra was making this definition. How could all these, and then he would show various feminists doing various dreadful things like Big Red, shouting at that. Other people may know this about this, the one I mentioned in the last thing to Aaron in the last hangout, where there's this woman who comes out and accosts some, I can't remember if it's even some men rights activists. Anyway, some chaps. Anyway, they were in the, and she's told, spouting about the patriarchy and all sorts of things at them. And they said, well, what about the fact that men die earlier? And she said, cry me a river and things. And she was completely contemptuous of the issues facing men. And there are quite a number of other people. Anybody who watches Girl Writes What, who gives a lot of reasons why society is not just sort of patriarchy, and the fact that men, and particularly if you go for things like equality of outcome, for instance, men die earlier, they are in more dangerous jobs, they have to fight for their country. A lot of them are responsibilities that women don't have. But anyway, getting back to what Thunderfoot said, he cited lots of really quite appalling women doing appalling things, and then contrasted it with then so advocating their own feminism and things, and then switching back to Aaron saying, "Oh, but this is the definition of feminism. This is the definition of feminism. This is the definition." And almost like, and I almost said it in the hangout last time, but I didn't. Where you could say the Nazis, we're a socialist party, and other people I saw later in the chat used the Democratic Republic of North Korea. We're democratic. It says so in our definition of the country. Therefore, it must be true. Whereas, of course, I was trying to point out, I didn't want to be too confrontational, but in practice, and what we've seen on campuses and things like the Toronto events and on YouTube and in feminist literature, and people like Andrea Dawkins who declared that all sex is rape, who Aaron Ross didn't seem to have ever heard of. I mean, there were whole things that go. So basically, Aaron Moore would deny anything that was going on that he hadn't. I mean, his personal experience seemed to be. I mean, I was a little bit reluctant to confront him because I haven't been to feminist conferences, and he was declaring that he had been to these conferences, or at least one, that he went specifically to challenge whether or not there was a definition of feminism was the one that he believed in. But in all his personal experiences, he seemed to be only meeting feminists in the mainstream, as he called it, and he did challenge us to find other ones that did not basically advocate their philosophy was the definition that he understood it to be. But it seemed to me that he was living 30 years ago or so. I mean, he was fighting a battle of 30 years ago. He kept on going about how his position now is influenced by this experience 30 years ago, and how he was fighting against prejudice and opportunities to women. And he was using it as an excuse all the time to have having the attitude that he did now, and based on this definition. But I think feminism, what it's called feminism, the movement, which is different from the definition, has moved on. And now we're now in social justice warrior land, and patriarchy accusations, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Aaron Ra, all this activity in YouTube and literature and media and newspapers and campus activity all seems to have bypassed Aaron Ra. And these are the points that people were making, and that basically the point that Thunderfoot made in the video, that Aaron Ra just clings to this definition that you could do to defend Nazism, to make the North Korea a democratic nation. But in practice, in reality, what's going on in the field is something appears, at least to me, to be something completely different. And so basically throughout the video, Thunderfoot was contrasting Aaron Ra repeatedly saying, this is my definition, and interrupting people as well. And then showing these feminists doing very SJW things and not really advocating the philosophy that Aaron Ra claimed they would be. And then also citing this business about, I reluctantly agreed to when he said in that 2 weeks ago that feminists should be responsible for controlling their own. And I think Ocean made a very good point, and I'd said it reluctantly. Well, I said they should do something about it. I didn't say they were the only ones, just as you can argue that if some society behave really badly, some political party, that's not only the members of that political party or some group or entity are responsible. If they do something dreadful, just as we don't allow theists just to criticize themselves, we atheists, we criticize Christian groups, and we feel entitled to do so. Just and similarly, there's no reason I believe that particularly if feminists are pushing an agenda that involves seemingly some sort of discrimination against men, at least these SJW types, that we are allowed to comment, we are allowed to criticize. And just because Aaron Ra's defense was, that's not been successful. Well, okay, that doesn't, it's like saying in the Second World War when we were fighting the Germans, just because the first 2 years didn't go terribly well and we were losing all the time, it didn't say you stopped fighting the fight. But it was quite a cutting video that Thunderfoot made, contrasting this definitional point versus all these examples that he grabbed from YouTube, etc., etc.
Yeah, I think that's actually, maybe that's a good way. First off, I adore and endorse the summary you just gave of both the overall situation and the fallout from a couple of weeks ago, where Thunderfoot quite quickly followed up with this video that, as you put it, and I think that's a good characterization of it. He's really focusing on Aaron's single and yet repeated statements about, well, this is the proper definition of feminism. If you're opposed to this, I don't know what's wrong with you. Then interleaved with shots of people who would self-identify as feminists, who are I'll characterize as batshit crazy, doing and saying batshit crazy stuff, and then back to Aaron saying, well, this is what feminism is. I think effectively highlighting that, as you put it, you and others have put it, the fallacy of definition. You can't just say, well, this is the word, so that's what it is. And I do like your summary of it. There's one tiny point that I want to take up, and I don't even think that you're mistaken in saying it, but I'm concerned about what it implies. So you're saying that you had said, amongst what I think was a great summary, that feminism sort of used to be about these important issues, but has now moved on to other things. And I don't know if we disagree in. I still believe that there is a core of feminism, right? That there are still feminist activists. I mean, Christina Hoff Sommers has been writing for however long. Feminism, as far as I can tell, has won the hearts and minds stage. There are just so many women in the world now that just, at least in my country and yours and in the States, that they just recognize, no, things should be fair. Things are not always going to be equal, right? We're going to have things like parental leave that applies to both men and women once they become parents, but we're going to have things like maternity leave that applies to, well, whoever gets pregnant. The women, right? So we're not always going to get equal things, but
outcomes. I mean, the key thing is equal outcomes equal opportunity rather than equal outcomes. That's the
right.
Key.
Yeah, and I do like that. That my concern is in referring to it as moving on, as if there's this core movement that then now sort of wins all these battles and wins the hearts and minds stage for the most part in these countries, but then moves on to deal with other issues. Those people are still there. Those issues are still there. It's now the pendulum has moved over, and we say, hey, this is these countries are now better off because of this social movement. It's not so much the core movement moving on, but there being this weird tumorous offshoot. I was debating whether to include the word tumorous in there or not, but there is something malignant about this extension of feminism. They're descendants of feminism. The movement comes from feminism. They call themselves feminists, and they're the ones who capture the spotlight. I don't know what Big Red or Trigglypuff would have been like in the world of the 1960s or the 1970s, or even through the 80s when a lot of these victories were being done. I mean, I would prefer to refer to that as an offshoot. The problem is
those are individuals, of course, aren't they? That's the key. Aaron would be correct to say those. That's why I was a bit reluctant to go really hard on him, because those two examples are just two individual women doing something stupid, and we couldn't use those just saying that's it, therefore feminism's gone bad. I completely accept that.
Right, and of course it's not just those two. And the problem is that when I say it's a branch off the sort of main core principles of feminism, it's a branch. It's actually a branch that has its own underlying philosophy. It's not just these what's the term, going cowboy, like no no, just these crazy people that loose cannons, that's the term I'm looking for. They're actually there is some cohesive thinking to what they're saying. It just turns out to be kind of some crazy stuff. But yeah, the patriarchy, just everything's a patriarchy. Everything's a patriarchy. It's about, well,
I've got to show, sorry to can I just interject just for a moment? There's that one. There's a woman or some transgender person with glasses, looks like a sort of young boy, but it's a girl or whatever. I'm not quite sure. Called Mo something, I think. She's quite famous, and she was saying, outline that all men are racist, all men are homophobic, all men. There's a whole list of things that all men are, and that's the sort of thing that really gets me going. And that got Thunderfoot. I think Thunderfoot even cited that woman, stroke girl, whatever.
I think we're gonna tread carefully on that individual, because my understanding, I'm sorry, I forget which way. I don't know whether to use he or she, because I can't remember. I think the person is in transition. I don't remember. I think people are referring to this person as him, and I think that's correct. But I'm not sure.
Black glasses, blonde hair.
Yeah, but because she's also apparently, or he, again, I'm not being disrespectful. I just literally cannot remember what her preferred pronouns are. So whatever. So it'll as I call him or her by the wrong pronouns, it's me misspeaking, not me not giving a shit. Just literally forgetting. Anyway, I'm going to say he, because I think most people have been referring to him as he. If I'm wrong, whatever. Anyway, he is like 15 or 16. So we're probably going to tread lightly for a little bit, because I don't want to draw too much. But yeah, I mean, actually, that's an interesting thing right there. So a teenager, and I'm going to refer to this person as a dipshit teenager, because everyone's a dipshit when you're a teenager, makes these videos that say, yeah, all men are sexist, all white people are racist, and is going to absolutely fall in with the party line that all penetrative sex is rape. And that gets a lot of attention. That gets you 1 million views on YouTube. And that gets to be the battleground for the entire discussion about the nature of feminism. And I think that's awful. I think that is a horrible thing for feminism as a long-standing and productive movement, and I think it's a horrible thing for the whole idea of there being social progress, where I think most people would define progress as equality and fairness. It's very destructive to those kind of things, but it's the circus sideshow that really draws the attention. I think that I want to ask this question about what do you do when you're in a movement, and there's these loose cannons within the movement that decide to say they represent the movement. We are the atheists, and if you don't believe this, then you're not a real atheist. Or heck,
we had this with atheism. We've had exactly the same with atheism plus, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I will say, ironically, who really has to deal with it is the Christians, because they have this offshoot, these radical evangelicals, that not only will these evangelicals refer to themselves as Christians, which they have some support for doing, although they throw out, they'll give you a definition of what a real Christian is, and that's someone who follows Christ's teachings, and without drawing a breath, they'll do something that's just so far outside of Christ's teachings that you just go like, okay, well then clearly you're not a Christian. But whatever, they believe in the divinity of Christ, so they're Christians, fine. But then they'll also turn around and say, well, anybody who doesn't believe exactly as I do on these critical issues is not a real Christian, thereby throwing out all the Catholics and all the mainstream Protestants and whatnot. So, I mean, the Catholics and every other Christian out there has to look at these evangelical nutters and say, well, I know they call themselves Christians, but I don't want don't want that to represent Christianity, be the exemplar of Christianity in your mind. So atheists deal with it, feminists deal with it. I mean, what does a social movement do when they get a Big Red or a Trigglypuff on their team, and everybody wants to go click on the Big Red videos and the Trigglypuff videos, and not Christina Hoff Sommers does that series, the something feminist, I'll look it up. But she does good information where she looks into claims about equality and fairness and then reports on the facts. There's science around these things. We've got people on YouTube that do these little 2 and 3 minute videos that explain the reality of the current situation of women in the modern working world. And I don't know, is she getting the views? She sure as hell isn't getting as many views as Trigglypuff.
Yeah, I've heard the name, but I haven't. Sorry, yes, I've heard the name, but I haven't watched any of the videos. But yes, it's interesting to see that someone's tackling it like that.
Factual feminist. Just go on YouTube, search for factual feminist. There's Christina Hoff Sommers. She is the author of Who Stole Feminism? Yeah, actually, let me give you one example, just for fun here, and I don't want to sort of lose track of what we're talking about because I do want to make a point about where I think Aaron has done something terribly wrong, and where I think Thunderfoot has done something terribly wrong and arguably kind of offensive. But with that teaser in place, have you heard?
We're on the edge of our seats now the whole time.
Oh yes, have you heard? Have you heard why you should stop using the phrase "rule of thumb"? Not a rhetorical question. Have you heard this rule of thumb?
No, I haven't heard that one. No.
Oh, where's it from? Oh, you haven't heard this?
The thumb was used as a unit of measurement, certainly back in the Middle Ages in this country.
Okay, according measuring of what?
A measure of length.
Carpeting, beer.
Length. I'm quite
sure it was. Okay,
someone will Google it and tell me that I'm wrong, but I'm fairly sure.
Oh, you're gonna love this. Okay, I'm gonna go. Where's my window here? What happened to my Vaughn window? I bet people in the chat know this, and they're gonna be typing like, "How did you guys never?"
They're not doing so at the moment.
Well, somebody typed in the Vaughn chat. Let's see, Simon123 says beating your wife in UK law. Apparently, the stick you could jit your wife with. A jit, assume is it's like wanker or. Oh, I'm sorry, hit. Okay, sorry. I thought it was UK slang for something. Apparently, it's a typo. Craig pops in, beating your wife. Yes, I think you're right. So according to, okay, so I don't want to relish this too much. So in it's called UK law. There's a lot of common law principles that were codified at some point. So you have like common law that's been around for centuries, and then the British Empire was sort of amongst the first to codify laws or codify, some people would say, and those become statutes, right? And a lot of times in these countries, we look and have to appeal back to, like, we have a thing here. Oh man, I'm just so meandering. We had a dog in Edmonton phone the police one time. The cops go in. They accidentally dialed 911, and the cops go into the house. They heard this breathing, and the cops go into the house, and they find a whole bunch of drugs and plants. It was a grow up. So they go back out, get a warrant, come back in. The guy's lawyers argue that it's a fruit of the poison tree. So he's trying to get all this evidence thrown out, and they say no, because the dog had phoned the police, and the police went in good faith, thinking that there was something going wrong in there. They should have been allowed to do the search. The law they appeal to is they go, and we do this all the time here. Go, well, there's an old English law about raising a hue and cry, and if somebody's like pulling a cart, or it's a donkey pulling a cart down the countryside, and they raise a hue and cry, and it invites investigation. You know, so we do this all the time. We don't have a law for something. We always go back. Well, let's look at old English law and see what they say. DPR is rubbing his temples at my poor characterization of the history of your nation's laws. But anyway, apparently one of these laws is that a husband is allowed to beat his wife with a stick so long as the stick is or rod is no wider than the diameter of the man's thumb. Hence the rule of thumb. So, now Simon comes back with, this might be a myth. I've looked for it in common law, not found it. I've had for years now, I think the first time I heard it was somebody in 2001 had told me, I was talking about something in statistics, and I said, well, whatever, rule of thumb. And this professor goes, excuse me, you shouldn't use the phrase rule of thumb because it's actually this misogynistic term that refers to beating your wife. And another professor was sitting there, said, no, actually rule of thumb comes from these beer makers that when they'd fill up the vat, they'd do it until the liquid level went up until the foam got up to their thumb. The foam could pass their thumb, but then when the wet part got to the tip of their thumb, that's when they had to stop filling the vat. And then somebody else is like, no, it had to do with the length of the hem on carpeting. Nobody knows where this phrase comes from. But we do know this. There is no codification in English law that says you're allowed to beat your wife with something the thickness of your thumb. That's ridiculous. And part of how this... who knows how these things start, but we know how this one ends. Because in the book, Who Stole Feminism, see, I'm getting to a point. In the book, Who Stole Feminism, Christina Hoff Sommers, who I believe is actually a lawyer, she's a researcher of some form. She wanted to document this thing, wanted to show people how misogynistic the world is. The fact that the empire would have codified this process for beating your wife, she said, I'm going to show you this. This is where this came from. And did all the searches, contacted lawyers, did all these other things, never did find reference to this thing. Eventually started contacting linguists to saying, do you know where this phrase comes from? Turns out there's no consensus on where the phrase came from, but it is certainly not anything to do with somebody beating their wife. So what she did, she put in her book, Who Stole Feminism, I went looking for this atrocious bit of law, and it turns out it doesn't exist. And because of this sort of thing, she raises the ire of a lot of the more radical feminists, because they say, we're trying to we're trying to wake the world up here, and you're going around fact checking. We don't need the fact checking. And so she does this series called The Factual Feminist, where she does things like this. Like you'll hear this statistic. I think it's 1 in 4 women who go to college get raped while they're at college. And so she's done a series on, well, is that figure really 1 in 4? I kind of hope it's not. If it is, we got to do something about this. If it's not, we got to stop telling people that's what it is, because it actually discourages women from going to college. Like what more could you do to make young women not want to go to college and say, well, you can go to college, tuition's kind of pricey, plus you're probably going to get raped. Like why do we tell people that women are going to get raped when they get to college? So she says something like that. Well, immediately she's pounced upon, because it's like, oh, you're a rape apologist. No one here is supporting. People are still debating rule of thumb in the Vaughn chat here. Anyway, so that's Christina Hoff Sommers. She wrote a book called Who Stole Feminism, where she writes about how there was this movement, these things go along. If you do your fact checking, you don't get the same thing. But that
Can I just
doesn't
pause
mean-
you there a second, Hogtie, because
you cannot.
I'm overwhelmingly arrogant, and certainly the chat in Vaughan seems to be suggesting the majority that the rule of thumb was a measurement of length, or that was how it was first used. I'm sorry, I just had to say that.
And she was a philosophy professor, apparently.
Yes.
Anyway,
sorry,
Hogtie, I apologise.
We've still got two punchlines to come from Hogtie.
I know.
Yeah.
I threw you off your meandering train
Oh, no,
of thought.
I was actually done. I was actually done.
Yeah,
I wanted to,
hold on, hold on. No, there were two punchlines about Hogtie and the offensive thing Hogtie had done, offensive thing that Aaron Ra had done.
Thunderfoot, I think you mean.
Sorry, did I?
I
Sorry.
think, oh, the offensive thing.
Yeah, you said
Mistake and offensive.
You had us on the edge of our seat when you the prelude. This whole thing was a prelude up to your declaration of what offensive thing Aaron Ra done and what offensive thing Thunderfoot had done. This is what we're all waiting for.
Well, I guess I promoted Christina Hoff Sommers enough. I don't think that Aaron would be impressed that I had done so. I know this was when we met in person. This was one of the things we argued about, was whether or not Christina Hoff Sommers is a real feminist. I don't know. No, okay. Aaron's mistake, I think, as a lot of people have identified, is to say, well, we're going to use this particular definition, and if you come and tell me that you're opposed to feminism, then you're opposed to these principles, and you're a crazy asshole. How could you be opposed to feminism? And then when you see these videos on YouTube, and there are now people on YouTube that make what they call anti-feminist videos. I mean, that bothers me. That it's a legitimate thing to do now, is to make something called anti-feminist videos. When you watch what they do, they're making fun of Big Red and Trigglypuff and Sarkeesian and that whole crowd. They're not really doing anything in actual opposition to feminist ideology, and I think Aaron recognizes that. But one of Aaron's mistakes is to insist that the feminists are these people and feminism is this set of principles, and to not be aware and mindful enough that there are some really, really, really crazy people that self-identify as being under the banner that he holds up over his head. I think he's right in using that banner, but I think he'll acknowledge that, there are some crazy people that call themselves feminists, but we're not dealing with them. That's, whatever. What he has to recognize is that when he encounters somebody who declares themselves to be anti-feminist, that person isn't necessarily a sexist or opposed to feminist ideology. They're opposed to crazy bullshit. And right now, the spotlight is on the crazy bullshit sector of the feminist movement. And he's got to be more mindful of that. Now, Thunderfoot, for whatever his motivations are, Thunderfoot's always been a just the facts, ma'am, kind of a guy. So when he hears ridiculous claims, and when he sees, I know he was quite upset for a while about Sarkeesian getting a bunch of money for doing absolute nonsense research that she really wasn't doing anyway. And he wants to call that stuff out because, in my view, and I'm going to agree with Thunderfoot on this, Sarkeesian is as much of a con artist as the solar freaking roadways people and what's the little water bottle now that draws water out of the air, these little bullshit inventions that people get GoFundMe or not GoFundMe, whatever,
Kickstarter.
All these different services, Kickstarter, all these various services. You can go and tell somebody, oh, I'm going to build a matter transference beam and we can have a colony on Mars and give me $12. Those people,
thorium-driven cars and things.
The thorium cars, yeah. So Thunderfoot's been blowing the whistles on stuff like that, and he puts in all that work on the thorium cars and how that's bullshit. And people are like, yeah, that does sound like bullshit to me. And then that's it. Go on to the next video. It doesn't really create a lot of a lot of drama. But then he says, oh, here's another scam artist, Sarkeesian and her bullshit. I'm going to look at bums in video games for hours and give my little report on it, but only report on the things that are consistent with some notion that I had before I even went in to look at this stuff. I'm gonna forget to look at all the video games, like Halo, where you don't see Master Chief's bum even when he's carrying the turret. But I'm going to ignore all the ones where you do see guys' bums and it's garbage. So he jumps on that, just like he jumps on the thorium car thing and the water bottle thing. And everybody's up in arms about it because, oh, well, you're a rape apologist. And that's just how they connect those dots, I don't know. So Thunderfoot, if he were a little more savvy, he would recognize, wait a second, he's got to stop and ask himself, do I agree with feminist principles? If he does, then he should say, I agree with feminist principles. You know what I think is really harmful to feminism and feminist principles?
Well, hold on.
These
you just
crazy
said
nutters.
Feminist principles, unfortunately, if that's as articulated by feminists that we see on YouTube. Unfortunately, feminist principles is exactly what he does object to, but not the definition that Aaron Ra would agree to. So that's the problem. When you say feminist principles, that is the principles of what people who call themselves feminists that are in our face.
Sure. Well, that's the easy fix then, is that he has to say what those principles are. And I'm going to agree with Aaron on this point. And it's not up to Big Red and what's her name, the woman you were talking about who says that sex.
Anita Dawkins.
Yeah, Dworkin, yeah. That these people who have these radical positions, these fairly modern radical positions, they're not in the driver's seat in defining what feminism is. And if Thunderfoot made a video that said, look, these are the core principles of feminism, and these are things I agree with. Now, in the 21st century, the modern world of YouTube, we have these people who are defining feminism for us, but they're doing it in such an absolutely loony, crazy way. I object to what these people are saying. I object to what they're saying about feminism. I object to the way that they dupe people and take their money to go do these things because they think they're helping women. They're not really helping women. But instead, what Thunderfoot does in a bit of a bull in a china shop kind of way is to say, okay, well, if these people want to call that feminism, guess what? I'm opposed to feminism. And he'll make these videos where he talks about feminism bad in this way, feminists idiots in that way. And doesn't, even though Thunderfoot is aware, my criticism of Aaron being that he doesn't take on board enough that there's this weird dual climate around the word feminism and dual usage of the label feminist. Thunderfoot clearly is aware of that distinction, and he capitalizes on it by ignoring the mainstream thing and saying, well, I'm going to make a bunch of videos making fun of crazy, batshit crazy people and under the banner of taking on feminism.
Yeah, but I mean,
do you think Thunderfoot really objects to feminism?
He doesn't. I don't think he agrees to the equality of opportunity and treating everybody fairly. I'm quite sure he doesn't. And this is the very first point that I made against Aaron Ra, that when he characterized people as being anti-feminist, I said the first question 2 weeks ago was, hold on, the people who are challenging you are not people who are against equality. They're against people who are advocating this SJW agenda. So your accusation that these people are sexist is untrue, because they're not sexist. They're not against equality. They're against the sensationalistic, these very visible feminists that include that bunch who for instance, we were talking earlier about in Toronto, those feminists who surrounded a bunch of blokes in that university campus. I can't remember, they were protesting about some meeting in which there's a very aggressive bunch of women and blokes with them as well, self-identifying as feminists as well, attacking these people who were just having a meeting or lecture or something, and they really were super aggressive to these people, and they were these people seem to be quite clearly the victims of the situation and not the aggressors, and these women were shouting abuse at these people in their face and things. That, unfortunately, is the reality on some campuses and things, and so I think Thunderfoot is entitled to raise that as an issue, and also there, of course, we're getting this deplatforming. Even people like Jermaine Greer, Richard Dawkins, Peter Tatchell. There's this deplatforming thing that's occurring in campuses, even in this country. We're getting this situation. And Peter Tatchell, who's a well-known gay activist, who's decades
Milo.
and these people are actually not. Apparently not. I mean, Rod Liddell does a wonderful bit in the Sunday Times every few weeks on this in his comment section, highlighting how these lefty people are actually suppressing free speech. So I think that it's right to identify that there is something happening in academia and on campuses that does need fighting, and to just dismiss it as you're not quite doing, but sort of saying it's just basically the nutters in this movement, and that and you almost said there yourself that it was the mainstream is the ones defining it, but there are others who are actively doing things that are affecting people in the real world, and I think Thunderfoot's right to fight against it.
Okay, well then I guess my criticism comes in the form of, well, here's what I would do, and that is make it clear when you start to talk about feminism, say this is what I'm supporting, this is what I'm opposed to, right? And maybe that's why
yes, I mean he could do a saying,
right?
Yes, he could start off every one of these sort of anti-feminist things saying, I believe in the principle of equality, I'm against discrimination, right, but these are the people I'm having to who've taken it a stage further and that I'm objecting. Yes, he could make that clearer. Yes, I'd agree with you there.
Yeah, and he doesn't. And I know when especially when Thunderfoot and Aaron have occasion to talk about it face to face, as it were, on the internet. To me, it just seems like such an obvious thing to do, to just make that point explicit. But he almost delights in not doing it. Like
I think it's almost like it's almost a given, though, isn't it? I mean, most people, I think it's quite reasonable to assume that he believes that as a red. It's almost as though he doesn't believe in having a slave or something. Or in slavery. It's almost like a sort of when no one really believes in discrimination. So he would argue, well, why should I need to waste time on stating the obvious?
Because the accusation is out there, and I will say, not with a complete lack of credibility, that Thunderfoot is an MRA supporter. And now, of course, everyone's a supporter of men's rights. So this is one of those other things, like you were saying about like the National Socialist Party or the Democratic Republic of whatever. Everyone supports men's rights, but these so-called MRA movements, these men's rights movements, they've got problems too. There's some pretty loony people in there. And the accusation is out there, and as I say, not completely lacking credibility, that Thunderfoot is an MRA dude. And he's not, to my viewing, really come out and sort of said with clarity, this is what my goals are, right? And yet in every other facet of his life, he's come out, he's talked about, if you ask him, why do you even have a YouTube channel? He'll tell you, and he'll get excited, right? He did that whole, Beauty in the Universe thing, where he talked about how I want people to embrace this stuff. I want to let people know that you can get your own little telescope, or you can make your own hydrolysis machine out of a hair dryer, and he likes showing people these MacGyver things. He has a lot of enthusiasm. You ever ask Thunderfoot, what is your opinion about this? Why do you do this thing for the public? He gets excited. He's vibrant in how he tells you this stuff. But when it comes to the MRAs, he doesn't come out and say what his opinion is about men's rights movements.
You're right.
I think he's inarticulate. Of course he can.
Given the fact, as you say, he has been accused of potentially being, misogynist, I suppose, or something, or is it misandry or something is the word? So you're right. Given the fact that the accusation, presumably he's aware of this accusation, so therefore presumably you're right to say that even if I believe it's taken as read and assumed, that he should say, well, just to make sure it's absolutely clear, he should at least mention it a couple of times, perhaps at the start of his videos, that just in case it's not clear, he should identify. So yes, he could improve his the clarity of his position.
Sorry, I thought I literally heard crickets chirping.
Are we done with it? I mean, I do want to take a moment, and it is kind of relevant to remind people of the death of Muhammad Ali over the weekend. A person who converted to Islam, I can't remember exactly at what stage in his career or what year.
It was in the late 60s, I think.
Yeah. I think it might have been after winning the heavyweight title the first time, which would have been 64.
Yeah.
And joining a rather dubious organisation run by Elijah Muhammad, the Nation of Islam. But if you, I suppose the point I'm seeking to make is that if you judged Islam by the qualities and actions of someone like Muhammad Ali, I think that he probably is representative of the majority of Muslims in the world. But of course you've got your outliers like ISIS, who again will call themselves Muslims and refer to every other Muslim as not a true Muslim. In the same way as, you've got the majority of mainstream Christians who would denounce organisations like the Westboro Baptist Church. And I think it's a fair analogy to make, isn't it? You've got what I perceive most people would have absolutely no issue with the definition of feminism that Owen was addressing or gave during the last show. It's his, as you put it, Rumpus, lack of knowledge or I think as you put it, Hogtie, his lack of appreciation, that there are these outliers who identify them under the same label, but don't fit within the broad definition that we understand. Just an observation. Anyone want to come back before we move on to my first topic? First bit of news item. Does anyone want to come back on that?
About that Muhammad Ali. I'm not fully familiar with Muhammad Ali, but I do wonder if that was more of a stunt. Was he really a Muslim after that, or did he just simply like the idea of getting together with a lunch of like other people with similar same?
He was devout throughout his entire life.
Right. Okay.
And his funeral today, no, it wasn't today. Whenever it's going to be held by an imam. But oh yes, he was devout 4 or 5 times a day, prayers throughout his life. Anyway, go on.
If there's one point I can touch on, just going back to our earlier discussion, the YouTube live chat is quite active and not just sort of nanny boo-boo comments. Some really good stuff on there, so I'm actually taking a moment to read that.
I've got Vaughan open, so if you want to read out some comments, then obviously we can discuss.
Well, there are a few people. Again, I'm always very cautious about making an accusation about someone else's opinions or actions without them having the opportunity to defend himself. I'm less cautious when it comes to either Thunder or Aaron, because they have unlimited access. They want to come in and correct it.
Vaughan seems to stop the video on Vaughan. Oh no! That's back again. Great. Let's go again.
There are some people. I see 2 people in there that are concerned about my repeating of this rumor that Thunderfoot is an MRA. I'm saying people have made that accusation, and the only term I'm using for it is without a complete lack of credibility that people say that. He certainly says some of the things, but I don't know that he is. I don't know that he's not. I accept that people who watch his video, people who watch his videos and then come here to post, they say he's not. That's fine. Don't. I'm just saying that's what people say. There is something that I did want to comment on, though. This is something that's been bugging me for a while about how conversations proceed, and in this particular conversation, and the other organization I forgot to mention was Black Lives Matter. There's a bunch of people in the States who have this idea that the police shouldn't be running around shooting black people. Seems like a reasonable position to take, but then you've got the Black Lives Matter movement that have now taken to just doing crazy stuff, right? So that was the other organization I should have included in that group. But a lot of times in these discussions, you'll hear somebody will express an opinion, and then someone else would say, well, you're a bigot. And the reason you call someone a bigot is to write off their position. So I don't have to now address any of the argument you raised, any of the evidence you're bringing to me to see how that fits into my position. I'm just calling you a bigot, and ta-da, you're dismissed. The same is true of, in my view, of calling somebody an SJW or social justice warrior. I find it a very, very dismissive term. And what brought that to mind, but yeah, they're just, drinks the Kool-Aid. Yeah. Some people are expressing concern in here that, it's funny, there are people in here that express the concern that Aaron Ra has drunk the Kool-Aid. And then there are other people who are criticizing people who say Aaron drank the Kool-Aid by saying that's not a real rebuttal. And I've come to that point myself, that you can say, you disagree with somebody, but if you go, well, that person drank the Kool-Aid, that's an okay headline, but you need to say what you mean. You can't just dismiss somebody as an SJW.
Yeah, I think that's a piece of bollocks. Not in this country, we've no idea what the drink the Kool-Aid actually means. But I'm glad I don't. I've never wished to, because it sounds like an absolutely piece of bollocks. I hate it when people just use little catchphrases to dismiss an argument instead of engaging with the argument.
Yeah.
It's a get out of jail. It's a sort of I don't have to defend myself sort of thing. You're wrong, basically. No. You might as well say it's just.
And I do have one other thought, but it's amusing, so I might add it to the quiz. If you're doing a quiz today, DPR, I will, if you'll permit me to add one bonus question on.
Oh yes, we will be doing a quiz, but it's not the story. I think we've discussed that as much as we can go. But this is a news item, and if you're watching on YouTube, it's going to take you a couple of minutes for this to appear. But if you're watching on Vaughan, it will take only a few minutes, a few seconds, I mean.
A few seconds, yeah, I got it. Yeah.
So if you've got Vaughan. Now, this is something that came out in The Guardian, and for those that don't know, The Guardian is reasonably well established and reasonably respected newspaper in the United Kingdom. And in this report, it talks about the number of people who are now identifying as non-religious compared with those that are religious. And what I found extraordinary about this, well, not only the headline didn't really shock me that much, but I don't know how much of it you can see, but it opens up with this statement: the proportion of the population who identify as having no religion, and this is what I found staggering, the timescale in which this happened, rose from 25% in 2011 to 48.5% in 2014, the survey shows. Now, that's almost
did they ask the same question?
I don't know. We can go through it, but that figure, the rate at which people are now identifying as non-religious or having no religion, I mean, that's pretty staggering, don't you think? A doubling in 3 years? You don't think that's staggering? Why not?
No. One of the viewers has got it. Somebody, episode 68 or episode 70 in there, because I predicted the proportions for the UK and for the US for 2015, and this is what I said it would be. Remember, we were having that discussion about the compression effect that the sigmoid curve. When social movements come, they tend to sort of creep in and accelerate, and then they get to a point where there's a really, really steep climb, and then they level off rather briskly again, and then they sort of incrementally work their way up, the so-called hearts and minds stage. And I was calling for the half and half point to be at some point in 2015 in the UK, and in the US around 2018. So
I'm not denying that you said it. I don't remember that prediction, but you have been proved to be pretty much spot on.
Well, better than that. Now, what's it going to be next year in the UK? Because if this model holds out, it's going to be over 60% for the. How often is a survey done? When was this survey?
There were two surveys done. One was in 2011. Let me scroll down and find out. I did read through it, but I can't remember. I don't know how clearly you can see that.
So I'll tell you, whatever the interval.
I'm trying to find out. I mean, there were two surveys done. One in 2011, one in 2014. I'm just trying to find out.
You see, I would expect something more dramatic to happen in the US, because we've had a stable, we've been sort of almost an atheistic country for 100 years or something, and we've I think the level of I can't remember what I've seen, is about 70 or 80%. I thought, well, there's something I thought it would become sort of. And there's been no new developments. There's been no radical developments in this country. I would have thought it would have been quite stable. Whereas in the US, I still think that is poised on a sort of catastrophic failure, because I think now that the atheism with the YouTube and everything and the internet, I think is gradually making that, what the Hogtie was saying, is eroding gradually the foundations, and Fox News is getting a little bit more and more worried about the Christmas thing, and you've got the the atheist chap, the head of the Atheist Association on TV a bit more. We had Dawkins, and I think there's the Four Horsemen, I think, had an impact, the God Delusion, Christopher Hitchens, and I think that's sort of working its way through, and even something like the Matt Dillahunty's Atheist Experience, where children are ringing in, and gradually I think with the internet, which is fundamentally, it seems to me, an atheist thing, with children growing up with it, I believe there'll be a big jump in the US, but I wouldn't have expected it here.
It's a different phenomenon.
I think there's a difference. I think you may be thinking of people who have been asked whether they, or in the censuses that are taken, are they religious, and the difference between those that claim to be religious and those that actually practice religion and go to church. But just reading through this to seek to answer your question, there's a quote from Stephen Bullivant. The striking thing is the clear sense of growth of no religion as a proportion of the population. He's a senior lecturer at St Mary's Catholic University in Twickenham, never heard of it, who analysed data collected through British social attitudes surveys over 3 decades. But it's not clear who actually conducted these surveys. If I scroll down, I might be able to find it, but one of the things that I found, well, there were a couple of things. Again, from the same person, the quote is, the main driver is people who were brought up with some religion now saying they have no religion. What we're seeing is an acceleration in the numbers of people who, people not only practicing their faith on a regular basis, but not even ticking the box. But there was a figure much lower down that I thought was kind of interesting, and just bear with me. I'm trying to find. Oh yes, it was this figure. As you'll see from the graph, the main group is Anglicans, then other Christians, then Catholic, and other non-Christian religions, and then no religions. But what I thought was fascinating is where it says neither church being the Anglicans or the Catholics, is bringing in fresh blood through conversions. Anglicans lose 12 followers for every person they recruit, and Catholic 10 persons for every person they recruit. Now, if that's a trend that is going to continue, as you say, Hogtie, in a few years' time, religion is not only going to be a minority, it's going to be a significant minority.
Well, of course, they've got huge problems now actually getting, certainly in the Catholic Church, of actually getting priests, and churches are emptying to the point now they're having to be closed down, and they're having big problems recruiting. And though, except I suppose the influx of Eastern Europeans have helped the Catholic Church, but this trend of churches gradually falling into decay because of the lack of attendance is happening.
Yeah. This two things come to mind. One is, actually, let me do this one first. Is Rumpus, you're saying a little surprised in the UK. It's a different phenomenon. I mean, the Americans right now are in a culture war related to science education, rights of the public. How do we do business? Like, if you run a bakery, do you have to make a wedding cake for the lesbians? Do you have to let the gender question mark people into your bathrooms? I mean, this is it's a culture war in the States over those issues and how they're connected to not so much religiosity, but to religious freedoms, right? And so it's a big movement there. In the UK, and certainly Canada, is a lot more stable in those regards. We don't have people that are marching into school board meetings and demanding this or that.
Exactly.
We don't have people trying to throw other people out of the bathroom, so they're very stable situations. But the cultural change is in about how you identify within your communities. And the new generation now is less concerned with, oh, well, my family's Catholic, well, my family's Anglican. And I think that's it's not as glitzy or dramatic of a social change as what we're seeing, the culture wars that are going on in the United States right now, but it is something that these other countries are going to continue to go through. I think we're sort of, your nation and mine are doing it sort of side by side. I think we're a little bit ahead of the UK in this regard, only because we're so much younger of a country. We tend to be less stoic with our traditions. But I used to tell people I was Catholic because my family's Catholic, right? And now you realize, well, no, why would you say that? And now it's getting to be more common in the UK to to speak more about your affiliation with a belief set rather than simply saying, well, I'm a member of this club or whatever else. The numbers, so now on that particular question, and again, now we'd have to repeat the math we did before here, but just to rough it in, if you take the interval of time between the two surveys, which in this case is about 3 years, and then the two percentages, take half of the difference in percentages, 3 years. Okay, so 2011 to 2014 is to 2017. And then from 25% to 48.5%, half that difference is 65%, 63 and a quarter, 63 and 3/4. That's what I'm going to put it at. In the 2017 survey, it'll be 63 and 3/4% will identify as no religion, and the rest will be a smattering. And that number is just going to creep up very slowly. After it gets to about 65%, in your country, it's just going to creep up slowly and level off. It's based on a pretty standard mathematical model for social change.
I'm very skeptical of those figures. I just don't believe there's been the change in our society that would merit that. Whereas I see the US as being much more ponderous, because there people go to church. There's all this hoo-ha about the info. I mean, when you see sort of Americans, and the Simpsons obviously an example, where they all go shit, the minister takes a role, and even when Jamie Oliver did that thing in the US about trying to weed them off having sugar, he felt obliged to go to the local pastor or something, and pastors revolve around, seem to get involved in society, and there's just none of that happens in this country. And I don't see that there's been a change, whereas I can see that it will be a big change in the US, but that's
a good point. Is a lot of times, how do these things evidence themselves? How do they implement? This is why these organizations do these things. Like there's the Scottish Attitude Survey. These different countries will hold these things about the attitude surveys of the people, because you don't always tell by their behavior. You got a clipboard. Of course, the questionnaires, clipboard and pencil questionnaires, aren't always the best indications of what people are really thinking. As Dawkins had pointed out when they asked people this question years ago about, what your religious persuasion was, and people checking off Anglican and Catholic and just going crazy with it. And then he said, yeah, but you believe the story. And they went, oh, no, it's all bullshit. So
yeah, cultural Christians, yeah,
the cultural Christians, right? So this phenomenon in the UK, in these attitude surveys, sometimes they're measuring something that isn't necessarily relevant for the functioning of society. And I understand you're looking across the ocean at these people that are grabbing their Bibles and waving them above their head while they're marching through Target to talk about how the manager of their local Target is going to burn in hell forever because people are allowed to pee in their bathrooms, And you say, well, I don't really see that sort of dramatic changes here. Like people, this study, 2011, 2014, 2017, your friends and neighbors and coworkers and the people that you ride the train with or whatever you do, however you get around, there's not really that significant of a real cultural change in the UK. It's simply people's attitude towards a particular thing that's being measured with a very fine dipstick on one question on a survey, on an attitude survey. That's why they're called attitude surveys. They're not called behavior surveys or belief surveys. They're just people's attitudes. So their attitude towards this one particular thing is changing ever so slightly, but it's not dramatic in the UK, nor has it been dramatic in Canada as that one particular.
I'm not suggesting there's been a huge shift so far as what people actually believe is concerned. What I'm suggesting, and this is addressed to Rumpus in his last comment, is that people are clearly feeling more free to identify as non-religious without having any sort of guilt complex. Their views haven't changed. They still didn't go to church in 2011. They don't go to church now. They identified because their parents identified in such a way, but now they're feeling more comfortable and more open in expressing the fact that
you said they haven't changed their belief. But sure, that's what the survey asked them what they believed, doesn't it? The survey asked them whether they identify or do they believe. Oh God, no! It was just identify as Christian, was it?
Yes, identify.
Right. Oh God. We see that's easy to. I think that's open to. Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
It's an
Okay.
attitude. Sorry, maybe we should have started with that. The difference between well, this is an attitudinal survey, the attitude survey,
You see, because I
and
could identify as a Christian. You see, yes, I mean this is a cultural thing. Because I'd probably
well, if
argue
that's your
I
attitude,
culturally identify as a Christian.
yeah, it might not be your belief, but it's your attitude. They're attitude
Yes.
surveys. We'd have to get into a discussion, I guess, about
Yes.
what's an attitude survey.
I
They're interesting. I mean, and people make good money, I guess, doing these population studies, and and they have like attitude surveys about gambling. It doesn't mean that people prefer things or believe things or whatever. It's just what's your attitude about it. They have some value, but as I say, they're usually the individual questions are like a very fine dipstick that measures somebody's attitude towards a very specific feature of their country. But how about this for predictions? I'd be interested from each of you guys. So we have. I'm just trying to think of examples. You've got one serious example of, okay, so are things going to change? Are they going to see real change as a result of things like this? Does this attitude survey, does the report in this attitude survey measure a change in something that's so profound, we're going to, as people's attitudes change, their behavior is going to change in a certain way? Are you going to clean up the House of Lords so that it's a democratic system instead of this handing off of seat from one old religious guy to the next old religious guy? Are the
Well, they're not all
Canadians going
religious.
to?
No, the House of Lords does have 22 seats, especially
Yes.
for bishops.
Yes,
or
only 20.
religious.
Only 22. Yes, only 22 of them are religious in the House of Lords. The other ones are just appointed
Yeah.
because they've done something.
I think what the effect it's likely to have is, as you say, to encourage people to feel more comfortable about speaking out about their lack of religious beliefs. Now, what knock-on effect that may have, I'm uncertain of. But the one thing that is clear, and particularly given those figures, as I say, the Anglicans, for every 12 they lose, they recruit one, and for the Catholics, every 10 they lose, they recruit one, is going to have, at some stage, some influence, whether as the Rumper says it's going to be the closing of more churches or whatever, whether it will have any more significant effects, I think only time will tell. I would feel uncomfortable in making any predictions.
I'd say no. I don't think that, other than the closing of churches, I think. But then you say we're getting quite this influx of Eastern Europeans are more religious, and that's boosted the Catholic. In fact, a number of the priests now are from, in the Catholic side anyway, are Eastern European. There's actually been a bit of a reaction to that. But things like the House of Lords losing the religious thing. Well, there's been a political one, but at the moment the political situation is with the government only having a small majority and the House of Lords actually acting as a more effective opposition than the Labour Party. I suspect there's no way we're going to get anything through the change in the House of Lords, for instance. I think there'll be no political consequences of this at all. No.
I'll predict one.
Yeah.
I think the law on assisted suicide and assisted dying, for which the religious are, on the whole, totally opposed to it. I think there will be a change in the law within the next year in this country. There's one prediction I'll make.
I'll go for 5 years. Within 5 years, that'll be a change.
No, I'll go for one, and I'll tell you for
that
why.
That law.
I'll tell you for
that
why.
law. Can I tell you this first? That law is not going to change until your prime minister is ready to start throwing elbows.
No, I'll tell you why it's likely to change.
I'll explain that joke later. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, sorry. If there was a joke there, it went over my head, so I apologise about that. And it's always a terrible thing if you have to explain why a joke is funny. But no, I'll tell you what's why I think the law will change. And it isn't in fact necessarily due to the lack of influence of the religious, but the result of the case of Tony Nicklinson, which we've discussed many times on this show, who was the person who had locked-in syndrome, and took his case to the courts to get a declaration that a doctor could administer lethal drugs to him to end his life without subsequently being prosecuted for murder or assisting in someone's suicide. That went to the even after the High Court rejected his claim in 2012, and he effectively starved himself to death as a result. It ended up at the highest court, the Supreme Court, and they came up with a very interesting declaration, or judgment, which was a change in the law in this area of such significance should come from Parliament. However, if Parliament doesn't make any changes to the law and a similar case comes back, then we are likely to make a change. And the government voted on this in September of last year, and by a majority of about 3-1 were opposed to any changes in the law that would make it legal to assist someone in their suicide. 82% of the British public, in a survey taken again, I think 2014 or 2015, said there ought to be a change. And the Supreme Court has said, if the government ain't going to do anything about it, we will. Now, there were two other cases.
How do they do that?
Because they interpret the law in relation to the European Convention of Human Rights, Section 8, I think. And what they will do is issue a certificate of incompatibility. That is to say that they will state that the law in the United Kingdom is incompatible with the European law, and that...
Yeah, but we're going to ban. Yeah, but that's going to be changed anyway. There's a movement with Theresa May is actually going to repeal the Human Rights Act and introduce a new one.
Well, I don't know whether she'll be able to do that. We at the moment, unless we vote leave, and until we have left the European Union, we are bound by European law. So what happens is the Supreme Court issues a certificate of incompatibility, and there is an onus then on Parliament to change the law.
No, that's separate. There's the law. The Human Rights Act is in the ECR, which is separate from the EU, so it's nothing to do with our Brexit. Although there is a condition of being a member of the EU that you have to abide by. But I think there's some suggestion that we could just change it and then leave it up to see what the EU does about it and see if they've got the balls to kick us out of the EU if we change it. There is some conflict about whether we. I think there's some sort of wiggling acrobatics, legal acrobatics they can perform to try and introduce new law, but somehow have it in parallel. But anyway, it's not the EU that determines whether or not we.
No, it's of course it isn't. It's our interpretation of the European law, and the judgment of the Supreme Court. If you want to go and read it, I'll send you a link after the show.
No, but the European Court of Human Rights has nothing to do with the EU. I've lost you. I can't hear you anymore.
Sorry, I'm still here. We've lost Hogtie. I don't know why.
So I didn't hear your last 10 seconds. I was just saying that.
Are we still? We're still okay.
Okay, I was.
Can you hear me now?
I can. Yes. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. So I thought we'd. Anyway, the European Court of Human Rights has nothing to do with the EU. So our membership of the EU has nothing to do with our being a member of that European Court of Human Rights. But right. There is a clause in the membership of the EU that that anybody joining the EU has to accept the European Convention of Human Rights and be subject to that court. So we could leave the EU, still be a member of that, and in theory we could actually leave it, but and still be a member of the EU. But then the EU would say, "Hold on, when you joined up, you agreed
I follow
to
where
this."
you're coming. Yes, I follow where you're coming from. You're quite right. But until that happens, there is a possibility that the law will change. But as I prefaced the whole statement on, I don't think that would be dependent upon the increased numbers of people regarding themselves as non-religious. It was just something that came to mind. It was perhaps an unfortunate example. Now, just so the viewers know, I got a message from Hogtie through Skype.
He's been bitten by a polar bear.
Yeah. Be right back.
He's got a plaster on it.
3 minutes ? So we will we'll be moving on to our quiz. Don't worry. In a few moments' time when we get Hogtie back. But Rumpus, you live in the United Kingdom, and I don't know how you don't need to tell me where you are or tell the audience where you are, but today,
home counters,
the 5th of June, was effectively what I would consider the first day of summer. I was able to sit outside in my garden without a shirt on, with shorts on, enjoying sunshine and finishing off a good book, and it was the first day that I could possibly have done that this year.
Absolutely.
And what really sort of like strikes me as interesting is when we do our next show in 2 weeks' time, the nights will start drawing in. Now, I know that's not conclusive of or an indication of summer ending, but I remember, and you've kindly told me now, that I think you're about the same age as me. I don't know, is my recollection of seasons when I was younger different, or would you concur with this? I remember there being quite distinct seasons. Hot summers, cold winters, rainy springs and autumns or falls being, identifiable. Now the seasons just sort of like seem to be
all over the place.
More sort of like, less distinct and more smudged, and you don't have this clear distinction. I can't remember a really hot summer. I can't remember.
There was one about 4 years ago, I think.
Yeah. But would you agree generally, though, that
this year's been very weird, as you say. It's become the 5th of June, and and I've been out in the garden hacking away at hedges, pulling my wisteria off the back of my house, fighting with numerous things with clippings and my hedge clipper, and fighting with the lawnmower, and in fact, even this morning it was so cold I couldn't open my patio door and leave it open. So it was only as the day went on I've been able to leave my patio door open. I've had to close it now. And I'm now just about considering putting out the patio furniture on the patio. Just thought about it, as you say, just so I could sit out there, get the sunshade up, and have a nice cup of tea or a nice gin and tonic out there. But it's only just today that's happened, and I think it's the 5th of June, and as you say, this is the longest day is in 2 weeks' time. It's absolutely outrageous. I don't know what's going on. I mean, about
I blame. Sorry, go on.
About 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I actually had a little holiday in the Cotswolds, and actually, for some reason, the weather decided for that 1 week that I was there to actually become quite warm. But that was an amazing interval between being really cold for it's been much colder than it should have been up until this date. Last year was a bit weird as well. So yes, there's something odd going on. But then again, it's weather, isn't it? Our weather is just so variable. I mean, goddamn Hogtie just have to deal with ice everywhere or something, and Aussie the same thing, and in California it's just the same every day. Just about. Whereas here, everything's changing.
Not anymore, and actually, it's Aussie's doing his summer stuff now, so he's not as available on the internet. But as little as we've talked in the last while, we've both had the same complaint. I mean, there's just been no ice and snow during the winters, and the summers are stinking hot. Like for northern Alberta, to get days over 30 degrees Celsius, like over 100 Fahrenheit, is getting to be routine, and it's just yeah.
Well, you have obviously a continental weather, a continental climate, right? So it gets really hot, does it, in the summer?
Right. I totally blew the conversion there. It's not over 100 Fahrenheit. Whatever it is hot. Let's say over 30 degrees Celsius is pretty rare, but now it's getting to be a fairly routine thing. Pardon my bad conversion there, but yeah, no, it's And then in the eastern Canada, they also get the humid, the warm flow up the Atlantic coastline. They get that warm, humid Caribbean air coming up, and they get.
Of course, you had that fire in that.
34.
You had that fire due to heat, didn't you? In that what was that? Muck something, that town near you. Well, had a fire. 30,000 people.
Yeah, it's still going on. Yeah. Well, it's 80,000 population and about 30,000 evacuated, and they're now starting to move back there. But the fires are still going. Like, that fire still hasn't been put out. It's just ripping across northern Alberta and northern Saskatchewan. It's just we've had a lot of rain, like in the central and southern part of the province. We've had a lot of rain for about a week. It's like rained every day. That looks like it's taken a bit of a break, but it was enough that, like, we knew the rain was coming, so the farmers started to get their seed in, but the ground's been completely dry. It just sucked it right up. So hopefully we'll actually have crops this year. Last year, the wheat was barely boot top high. So yeah, in this part of the country, we've got drought conditions, just heat and drought. And in the winter, this last winter, the snow wasn't even enough to get up to the tops of the blades of the grass.
We need your wheat. My partner's got a bread maker, and she needs that. She gets Canadian wheat because it's the best. It's the most. Is it most starchy or something? And it produces the best bread. So I won't be impressed if you don't produce any wheat from there.
We're all having trouble. No wheat, no oil, like all of the things that Alberta generally.
Shale presumably is no longer viable, is it? Shale oil is presumably not being done anymore. They stopped that, have you?
We do a lot of tar sand stuff, but yeah, I mean, ever since the price of oil went down, they stopped exploration. And then the thing that's notable about Fort McMurray, it's worth checking out a map to see how Alberta is organized. Edmonton is so Calgary is clearly the major urban center of southern Alberta. Edmonton is the major urban center of northern Alberta, although Edmonton's located in the south half of Alberta. So, because when you go to the actual north half of Alberta, it's just nothing. All the highways kind of spider out from Edmonton and Calgary with this major highway in between the two of them, the Highway 2, and then little sort of offshoots from that. But then you get up to the north and there's just like little trails, right? And then there's this Fort McMurray. It's just way up there. Who knows why the city's there? Well, it's a very productive area for oil sands, and they've just had to shut some of those places down. Some of the facilities have been damaged by the fires, so our production has gone way down. I mean, I understand this week Petrocan has actually their major supplier, I think it's Suncor is their major supplier. You go to Petrocan now, so the price is on the signs. They'll give you the price in it's Canadian cents per liter. And it'll be like 84 cents per liter regular unleaded, and then it's 94, and now it's 106. Except at Petrocan, the sign says 000 because they have no fuel. So it's a strange situation here these days. But yeah, and the fires are still going. They don't. I mean, people think, oh well, there's we don't see it on the news anymore. They must have got that problem solved. No, once we get a fire in the boreal forest, it just goes for the until winter comes.
Okay, let's move on to the quiz. I'm going to step away from the computer for about 2 minutes, but I'll put up the first question. Talk amongst yourselves. Which one have I got? That one. Okay. That'll be your first question. Talk amongst yourselves for 2 minutes, and then we'll crack on with it.
Yeah, hold tight. Definitely going to do this video on the calculation of Earth and things. I agree with you. By the way, your approximation does work very well. You're using just Pythagoras' way of doing it. It does give you until you get to the point where you're looking hundreds of miles. It does work quite well.
Yeah, and I do like the simplicity. People like their triangles, so
yeah.
So I just went full. Go ahead. No. Well, I was just going to take a look at the question, but yeah, I mean, well, let's just for a moment, while we're for TPR, the flat Earth thing. So the audience may or may not know, but the Rumpus and I have been for some time been engaging the flat Earthers. Some of them are friends of ours from the regular community that we'd be talking about evangelicalism and creationism and whatnot. And some of those people have gone very strongly to a flat Earth view, so we've engaged them in that conversation. Although it's really seemed to have gotten quiet lately. It really seems like their major argument seems to be that, oh, you're all fooled by the government, and anybody who, was willing to reshare a NASA photograph is a government shill. And there's really not been that much sort of math-based discussions on what would we expect to see if the world were spherical, or what would we expect to see if the Earth were a flat dish? That's tapered off considerably.
I used to like presenting long exposure thing from the point of view of being in Ecuador, where you're looking and you can see the North and South Pole, and you can see the spirals going, and therefore the South Pole's got a particular place. But of course, just a simple shot of the sun going over the horizon, which means, I mean, that one picture of the sun being halfway over the horizon, and if it's going to dip below that means everywhere's going to go dark around the entire world. I mean, it's just so ridiculous.
But then they show their photos. They'll show their photos of, and of course, it's people who don't know how to set the aperture on their cameras.
Yes.
They show their photos of like, well, there's the sun in the middle of the sky, and it's a big, big ball of fire. And then as it starts to dip down below the horizon, the disk appears to get smaller. And you can't show, okay, well, do that for the moon. No, they'll never do that for the moon because it doesn't work. And do that with proper aperture exposure settings.
Yeah,
you know,
constant. Yes, keep the aperture constant. Yes, that's the thing. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a wacky area. I was going to say of the flat earthers though. There's an apologist who I think you're acquainted with him. You certainly know of his material. But Matt Slick, he's the director or the Pope or whatever of CARM, the Christian Apologetics Research Ministry, I think is what CARM stands for.
Is it really research? God.
Yeah. Apologetics research. The site. I mean, if you go to carm.org, if you ever have a question, holy crap in my brain! Right?
So,
that's just piercing.
Sorry, hold on. Sorry.
Hope someone needs a kidney transplant for that ringtone. The carm.org website. If you have anything that you're sitting there going, well, how did Judas die? Like, did he hang himself in a tree, or did his guts spill out, or like what's going on here? You go to carm.org. Matt Slick will have written an essay up there that'll explain to you how atheists have got that wrong. Just about every question you have, carm.org ends up being kind of this repository for biblical interpretation questions, theology questions, questions for atheists that they can't answer, questions that atheists claim that Christians haven't answered, but Matt Slick has. The site is chock full of stuff, and I mean it's full. Anyway, Matt Slick only recently encountered this phenomenon of flat Earth, and I know I've been talking with Bible Thumping Wingnut about it, and he and I have a hangout we'd promised each other to do, and then just haven't scheduled it. They want to know, what do Christians look like when the subset of them start talking about flat Earth? Like, do we look kind of bad? And I said, well, yeah, kind of. But Matt Slick has now come out with an opinion on it, and he says, in his view, that these people who are flat earthers, at least some of them, are not actually Christians. And he's not saying that they're not real Christians. They may think they're Christians, but they're not really saved. They're not part of the elect. No. It's not that. He's saying that they are atheists pretending to be Christians to make Christians look crazy. And I laughed when I saw that, because I thought, I've heard that like a surprising number of times. Like when you talk to a real diehard Christian, especially an evangelical creationist, when you talk to them, no, seriously, this flat Earth thing, that's a serious thing. Like, look at this. They'll say, I don't think so. And then they'll come up with this. Well, there must be atheists faking being Christians to make us look bad.
Yeah, but we've seen these people who have gone that way, and they're not atheists. They're just morons. Well, even who are Christian morons.
Yeah. Well, actually, I've been brewing a theory for a while, and I've wanted to do a post about this or a video, but maybe I'll just say it here. I think a lot of them, they're really looking for the magic bullet to kill atheism. And I've heard these comments. There's a couple of days where I heard a comment in sort of 3 different domains. One of them is why do you push flat Earth? Well, because if the Earth is really flat, well, then atheism has no explanation. That's the end of atheism. Our friend who's really into intelligent design says the same thing. Well, if there's an intelligent designer, that just kills atheism.
You're right. I mean, in fact, I think you're right about that, because I even expressed that. I think when I was speaking to one chap who was advocating this, I actually said to them, if it was shown that we were living on a flat Earth, then that would completely invalidate science and my view of the world and my the reliance we have on what we're being told and NASA and everything, and it would be catastrophic for us. And so And then the flat earth in question giggled quite a lot to the fact that I say it would drive me completely bonkers. And so obviously they love the possibility.
Yeah. All right. Well, sorry, DPR. We
Oh, that's fine. I
wandered briskly
apologize.
through other topics while you were gone.
Yeah, that's no problem. I've got a theory. My theory is Matt Slick is a rude and offensive person, but hey, I don't want to waste any time on him.
He comes across as very polite on his website.
Yes, I'm
Carb.org.
I'm sure he does. Where were we? Yes.
He owes me $5 for pimping his site on our show. Okay, where are we? Oh,
Okay.
This guy. Oh, this is sorry. What's his name? I want to remember his name.
Well, it's written. It's written on the screen. So
No, I'm trying to remember what G-Man calls him. Kim Jim Jong or something.
Oh, right.
This is the guy who. He's the guy that has a bunch of nuclear missiles in South Korea, so that he can attack New York across the Atlantic Ocean.
In South Korea.
According to G-Man,
Wow.
attack New York off from across the Atlantic Ocean from South Korea.
From South Korea. Okay. All right. Well, let's not get into G-Man. So, question number 1: what, according to North
Defector.
Korean defector?
Defector, yes. So according to a North Korean defector, he's claiming something.
Yes. Is the country's leader Kim Jong-un trying to do for his sister, who is pictured left? A, find her a husband. B, put her on trial. C, make her his heir. So audience, please.
I hope Hawkeye switched off the side chat like I have, because he's going to get thrashed again, I'm sure. So who's going first?
Rumpus, you can go first on this
I think
one.
find her a husband. I'm not sure about this one, but I'll go find her a husband.
Okay. Hogtie, you could take the same answer, you could choose a different one. And I'll keep the score this time.
It's not really big. Why would he put her on trial? He's not big on trial. I'm gonna say yeah, find her a husband.
Hog and audience. Audience is split. But
Okay.
find her husband is the right thing.
Yay.
So 1 point each to
Yep, it's 1 point to me.
and Rumpus, and we'll give the audience half a point for that one. Second question. Oh, I thought this was really funny. I do know the answer to this. Which organisation was revealed to still be using 8-inch floppy disks such as this in its offices? The House of Lords, the US Nuclear Weapons Force, or Indians Railways? And we'll just give the audience, and this time it's going to be Hogtie to go first.
I hope he's not looking at the answers.
These are.
I'm sure he isn't. But
These aren't even 5.5 inch.
No, these are
5
8.
and a quarter. 5 and a
Yeah.
quarter. These are 8 inch.
No,
Wow.
No, that's 5 1/4. I think that's 5 1/4.
No, the question. If you read the question, I'll repeat it
Oh,
again.
it's 8 inch. Oh, bloody hell! Sorry, right. Sorry, I was just trying reading the question, shouldn't I?
Right, I've got from the audience. I've got a.
Well, I'm giving them time.
It's
But
the
thing
majority
is,
of the audience have gone for 1, which I'm not going to tell you which it is.
Yeah, don't let
So,
Hogtie,
Hogtie, which one?
well, I'm going to say the thing is that may be pictured. That is actually an 8-inch picture. You can tell by the size of the access hole. But it might be the case. Even going to Shutterstock, they wouldn't be able to find an old 8-inch floppy. There are even pictures of those around. I'm going to say the U.S. Nuclear Weapons Force.
Okay.
Yeah, I am as well.
Okay, and that's what the majority of the audience has gone for, and you are absolutely correct. So,
Yeah, I read that one.
1 mark to you two
One mark
and
to
the
me.
audience.
So it's neck and neck at the moment. Normally Hogtie's in my dust.
Question 3, and it's going to be Rumpus go first on this one. And again, we'll give the audience a little bit of time to catch up. It's been announced that the film actress Angelina Jolie has been appointed a visiting professor at which British university? London School of Economics, the University of Brighton, or Oxford University?
Oh, bloody hell. Oh, God.
Well, just give the audience a few seconds. They're about 9 or 10 seconds behind us, so we'll just let them have a think. We've got Well, I'm not
You
going
think
to tell you.
you think you don't want me to influence them? You mean?
No, they wouldn't. Well, we've got. They're a bit reticent on this one.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
We've even got someone saying the answer is who cares. But
come on! I bet the people at whoever's at the
answers.
university would appreciate her turning up and professing to them.
Okay, so
I'm going to go for University of Brighton.
Brighton, Hogtie. You're
Hold
going
on,
for...
there is no. Hold on, no, I'm not going to. There is no University of Brighton, is there? That's
I'm sorry, I've
bloody
got to take your first answer.
Oh,
I didn't hear it. My wife and son had just returned, so I didn't hear Rumpus's answer. I had already pre-selected University of Brighton.
So you're both going for University of Brighton?
This is going to be my strategy. Just
in that case,
shadow.
the audience
Going for a tie.
And
Going for a tie today.
you're not getting any points, but the audience takes a point on that one.
That's
okay,
fine.
question
All according to
4.
plan.
So what was the answer?
London School of Economics.
London
Alright,
School
okay.
of Economics, yeah.
So I'm so.
Who is this
Yeah.
woman and why was she in the news this week? She's the latest Brazilian minister to be forced out of office in a growing political scandal. She's a French trade unionist leading a strike at the country's nuclear power stations. She's a Ukrainian fighter pilot who has been released from jail in Russia.
So it's Hogtie to go first.
I know most countries allow women to serve, but not as fighter pilots. Are they Ukrainians letting women fly? That doesn't sound right. Trade unionist leading a strike. Brazilian minister forced out of office during the political
Okay.
scandal.
Rumpus?
A.
She's the Ukrainian fighter pilot who's been released from jail in Russia.
She is
Really?
indeed. Yeah. So Rumpus takes one, Hogtie naught, and
my dust.
audience overwhelmingly went for the right answer as well, so they get a point. This woman is pictured taking part in a 32-hour reading marathon in Norway. What is she and several others reciting? A. The complete terms and conditions of 33 well-known mobile apps. The complete 6 volumes of Norwegian writer Carl Ove something memoirs. The complete text of the United Nations Constitution. Who's going for? Is it Rumpus first on this one?
It's my turn. Yeah.
Someone's claiming victory in the audience, and there's still a couple of questions to go.
Yeah. I've only got one wrong so far.
That's correct. You have.
The obvious one is obviously the Norwegian writer, so that's just too obvious. I think it's going to be the mobile apps one. How about that?
Okay. Hogtie.
I'm pretty confident. I hadn't heard the story, but I'm pretty confident it's the mobile apps. A.
Oh,
And I think there is a little bit of a clue in the background.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're absolutely correct, and actually, the audience majority didn't go for it, so the audience don't get a point, but both of you
yeah.
do.
Bloody useless audience.
So 1, 1, and 0, but the audience is still. Oh no, Rumpus is winning. Rumpus is on 4, Hogtie on 3, audience on 3.5. Next one. The actor Bert Kwok, who died this week at the age of 85, was best known for playing the sidekick of the bumbling Inspector Clouseau in Peter Sellers' Pink Panther films. What was his character's name?
Sweet.
And it's Hogtie to go first, isn't it?
Is it?
Yes.
Oh, it's Kato.
Bad luck, Hogtie.
You're going for Kato? Are you?
Oh yeah.
Are you going for a different
yeah.
answer, Rumpus?
No, I'm going for Kato.
And the audience. Bit of time to catch up here. Well, the first one's going.
He was great. I
Kato.
really enjoyed
Yeah.
that. Though. He's
Second
great.
It was a
going
great
for
bit. It was a
In fact, I
great
read
bit.
some. I was reading about this, and he was saying that he was very reluctant to take the role because he said he almost got no. There were almost no lines, and he was just falling over all the time. So he was very reluctant to go for it. But he actually rejected it initially, and then his agents told him, you need to do this. You haven't got any money. Go and bloody do it. So he reluctantly did it, and of course it was defined him.
There we go. So,
and he did also appear in a Goldfinger film. I think it was the James Bond baddie in Goldfinger as well. And I remember seeing that, thinking, "Oh yes, I recognise that guy." And he was once interviewed by some journalist. I can't remember why he was telling on television. It's about 5 years ago. And he gradually became aware that this guy didn't really know who he was, and so he sort of strung him along a bit. and then eventually said, "You don't know who I am, do you?" And then this guy, the journalist, had to admit that he didn't. Whereas it seems to me he's got you can't really not know who this guy is. But so he was great, I thought.
It was a great bit, and I was reminded during the O.J. Simpson trial, because remember, one of the big witnesses was this weird friend / houseboy, whatever, Cato.
Oh, yeah.
And people used to joke about what was Cato's job. Well, it was to jump out from closets and scare OJ.
Has anybody seen the O.J. Simpson reenactment, redramatization? It was about 7 parts. Was on the BBC, obviously in this country, a month or so ago. I don't know if the trial.
No, not that recently.
With David Schwimmer. And it was a bloody fantastic thing. One of the best things American television's ever produced. So it was really gripping. And they had the poor woman who was the trial, the prosecuting lawyer, and then and the trauma she had to go through when she changed her hair, all the abuse she got about having changed her hair, and oh my god, and then she had to change it back again, and it was the gloves business.
It was called Marcia.
That's it, Marcia. That was it. Yeah.
Marcia. Oh.
And in the middle of all this, she was having a custody battle with her husband, and her husband was using the fact that she was spending all her time at the trial as a thing against her for getting custody of her children. Oh dear.
I remember watching that trial because I just started practicing as a barrister, and it was broadcast. A lot of it was broadcast live, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. The BBC did actually cover it.
The quality of the advocacy, I have to say, even as I was just starting, I thought was absolutely appalling. But anyway,
it was dreadful. But another point on that thing was the appalling quality of the forensic handling by the police. They actually they left the samples, mixed the samples up. They left them 24 hours in warm temperatures and things, and they actually had to go to a British. I think the defence actually went to a British forensic unit, and the British forensic unit could not believe how incompetently they handled the samples, and so they were able to use that against them, amongst other things. And then they found this random chemical in the blood or something that shouldn't be there, that was indicative of having been in a lab or something. It was so obviously totally 100% guilty, and racial issues got in there just to it's just drive me nuts.
But he really fell off.
He's in prison at the moment.
Because, I mean he lost the civil trial.
Yeah, but
that had no killing. I don't know how much that cost him, but then he did an armed robbery, didn't he?
That's right, trying to retrieve some of his art, some of his previous. Someone somehow got hold of his trophies from the previous years, and so he then actually robbed someone along with someone else. He formed a gang with someone else, and then robbed the people from his trophies to try and get something back. And he also wrote a book on how, if someone were him, how they would have committed the murder and got away with it. I mean, it was just extraordinary. He wrote this book about how he would have done it, and this is not something you'd brought up if you hadn't done it. I mean, it's just most tragic. Just demonstrates just how the effect of celebrity on and of course the jury were, obviously they were racially biased and things, and so it just shows to show what a travesty American justice can be sometimes. But I suppose British, as we are, examples as well. But that just seemed appalling.
Yeah, I think he's up for parole next year. But anyway, the 7th question. David Cameron is photographed here buying a second-hand car from a dealer in his Oxfordshire constituency earlier this week. What did he buy and how much did he pay? And I see from the audience that they've got a very firm opinion on this, and I would have had absolutely no idea on this question. It's a guess, and I can't remember who goes first.
I think it might be me. And I read the story, and I actually they read this about a week ago, and I happen to remember what the car was then, and I remember that I remembered it, but unfortunately I've forgotten what I'd remembered. I don't think it's the Nissan. Oh God, it wasn't the Honda Civic.
I presume that the car that you can partly see behind it is the car that he bought.
Ah, right. Okay, in which case then, Nissan Micra.
Okay.
Oh, you just
you any
gave
good
him a
with
clue at the
cars?
last. You should go with his first answer. You should have.
Okay, I'll
Yeah,
take his. You're quite right. I'll take his first answer.
Bugger, Hogtie, you.
Go on. So Hogtie,
hoodlink.
you're saying
I don't know this story at all, but the hood length is too short for a Civic. It could be a Micra.
what did you say? What did you say first, Rumpus?
I said Nissan Micra.
No, you didn't. You said Civic.
You said Civic first. I honestly I can't remember, but Hogtie seems confident that it's what, a Micra?
Yeah, well, that's my guess.
Yeah,
I don't know the story.
Yeah, you've drawn level.
Bugger! I let that slip.
What did the audience? Oh, the audience is. Oh, hang on, Civic. No, I'm not going to give any points to the audience on that. So at the end we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 for Rumpus. We have 5 for Hogtie, and we have 4.5 for the audience.
So, you know what,
okay.
I should have looked at the picture. I should have looked at the picture. Damn it! I would have got.
I'll tell you what. We've got a
Decider.
Decider. Yes.
Oh, yes, right.
Right. And
I was coming up with the decider.
No. You can come up with your question.
Yeah, you can't have a decider on your question.
No, it was
right.
Well, I want to ask it anyway. Go ahead. Yeah.
I want you to, both of you, tell me how many countries or states are members of the United Nations, and how many countries or states are members of FIFA. And we'll sort of like take an aggregate and see who is out by most. So to be fair to both of you, we'll start with Rumpus on the first question,
right,
and Hogtie on the second, and then Hogtie on the second question and Rumpus on the second question. So Rumpus, you go first. How many states
in the
are
UN.
members of the UN?
I'm going to go for 152.
Okay, Hogtie?
191.
Okay. And the second question, how many countries are members of FIFA? This time Hogtie to go first.
214.
And Rumpus?
180.
180. Okay, well, without having to do the maths, I can tell you that Hogtie is the winner.
Oh, bugger.
He was two off with the United Nations. There are 193 members of the United Nations, and there are 209 members of FIFA.
Oh, not awful.
So
I had.
Rumpus,
I want to. Okay,
you were a bit. Well, I'll tell you what was interesting though. You both got the fact that there are more members of FIFA than there are members of the United Nations.
We'll take the UK for instance. We've got 4 in FIFA that are not that are represented as one country, and I think there's some other similar things. And there are little sort of mini countries like the islands. I think have got represented. And the islands are in the west. I bet the Caribbean has got some FIFA members that are not the sort of Trinidad and Tobago. And I suppose there might be one country, one. So I suspect there's not quite a bit of that.
That is actually a state, but
yeah, and one. Yeah,
it doesn't.
Okay,
it doesn't matter, Rumpus. You know, when it came to the crunch, you failed miserably, and I think congratulations to Hogtie on this one.
Well, he's got to win once.
Although I got to share the credit. I'll tell you where I got that on the bonus question there, the big decider. CPG Grey. I had recently binged watched a bunch of CPG Grey videos.
Oh, he's excellent.
Is he not? Yeah. Yeah, he does such good stuff, and he explained this thing about, like, what is technically a country.
I'll put a link to his channel.
Do you know? Oh, you got to put a link up. Do you know?
To his channel. I've never spoken to him, but I have watched his videos.
He lives like 8 blocks from your house.
My house?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where you live. I don't know where he lives.
We don't have blocks. Hold
It's
tight.
not
We
a big
do not
country.
have blocks.
Oh,
in this
I heard
country.
that. You know what? He mentioned that in one of his videos. He does these videos because he's American and he's since lived in London for some time. And he mentions things like about how your street numbering makes no sense at all. How when you people give out your phone numbers, you always do it with this weird rhythm. You always go like, "Oh, what's your phone number? Oh, it's 722 646 88." Like what? What? How are you reading your? Yeah,
Well,
CPG Grey.
That's the one thing. Oh, hang on, let me change the screen back. That's the one thing that I hadn't heard and isn't accurate. But
What?
Yeah, I've seen that video on the house numbers, and indeed, I think Americans are absolutely astonished that there's a house number 1 on a street, and they think, hold on, don't all streets start with 100 or something? So they can't cope with the fact that we have 1 and then 2 and then 3, and they're on the opposite side of the road, and they get all completely confused by this, whereas to us it seems perfectly sensible. And you suddenly have the one.
We don't have roads long enough to have house numbers with 4 digits, where in America it seems fairly common.
Well, the thing is, when you look at New York and their blocks, you just look at the city plan, you think, God, how boring is that? You know, it's not, where are the bends? I mean, it's like Milton Keynes, for Christ's sake, where they, you know, some of the most anybody ever did with the design of those roads was use a bloody set square. And they only discovered the bloody bendy thing in the last, about 10 years ago. God damn it. I just can't, I can't cope with non-organic cities that are just based around set squares. It just drives me nuts.
Well, we're not. We have places to park. Listen, we have places to park, and we're not knocking.
Right, that's another thing. That's another thing about parking. When I was in bloody California,
we're not clipping cyclists with the side view mirrors in our cars.
You have these in bits of California. You have a shop, and then you have a car park that's about 10 times the size of the shop, and then the next shop, which has got another car park, about sort of you could run a farm in there with some animals running around and train horses or whatever. And then there's a next shop. So you actually need a car to get from one shop to the other. Whereas in this country, you have a shop and then you walk next to the next shop and then the next shop. And Milton Keynes, again, was somewhere I preyed upon my mind, has got the same problem. It's got these shops. And then again, it's got a massive car. It's almost imported this sort of horrible set square, massive car park infection. What the bloody... Sorry.
I want to ask my trivia question though. Once the grating noise stops inside my head, I ask my trivia question. We're talking about measurement systems. It's a good measurement question.
Is this? Are you holding up your thumb?
No, I'm goofing around with a piece of Lego. Okay. I got the fidgets. I always get the fidgets during the show, and I'm always surrounded by bits of Lego. I don't know what this is. I think this is a pterosaur.
Lego has improved a great deal since I had it when I was a child, because all you had. Rumpus.
Hold on, let me just.
So loud.
It might be an important call. Do you need to take it? You see, I have the courtesy to turn off my phone during the course of, or not turn it off, put it on mute. And just before we went, no, I won't tell you that story. Right.
I think
we
need to wait for Rumpus to...
I'm back. God
okay,
damn it,
there we
bloody
go.
people trying to talk to me.
Hey, I'm typing a phrase in the chat on Vaughn, and the same phrase in the chat on in the live chat on YouTube. Donner six pouces. And it's the name of a foul in what sport? And what is the foul exactly? I can tell you this is something you're not allowed to do in this sport.
It's
never seen it.
Presumably chicken. Is it?
No. It's something. It's giving away 6 points by the looks of it.
Right.
Donner,
So it's cricket. It's not cricket. Is it cricket?
It's got some sort of like French connection, if I'm right, with donner, to give. 6.
Give, yeah. 6, yeah.
And pouce points.
Pouce.
So
pouce.
We're talking about a sport.
Cricket.
It's not. No, giving away 6 points. Give 6 points.
Give 6. It's not points. Point and point. The same spelling. Pouce. C'est un pouce. The thumb. To give poorly translated, it would be give 6 thumbs. That would be a very confusing way to translate it. Knowing that this is from a measurement system where the inch is defined as the French king's thumb, some French people never used a different word for it. So they actually still call the inch, they call it the thumb.
So properly translated, it would be to give a guy 6 inches, and it is not permitted. You will actually get a penalty.
To give 6 inches is a penalty.
To give 6
Are
inches.
we going back
Yes.
to feminism and all intercourse being rape?
Yeah, I tell you, everyone on the YouTube live chat has got you totally whipped so far. Midget tossing. No, yes, you'll be asked to leave the game for a 2-minute period if you do this. Yeah, that's too big of a clue.
Ice hockey?
I want to say no because you said ice hockey. I'll tell you the where the rules are printed in English. The English version of the penalty is called butt ending. If you are caught attempting to butt end a fellow in this game, you will be asked to leave. Briefly, you're allowed to come back after a while. If you attempt to give a guy 6 inches or to butt end him during the game, off you go.
Wow, this is fascinating. I tell you what, I so much more love asking the questions than answering them. 6 inches a game, you've got to leave for 2 minutes. Can I ask a question? Is it a team sport? It must be a team sport.
I mean, rugby.
It is a team sport.
Rugby?
No, you don't. It wouldn't be rugby.
No, I suppose you don't give. Oh.
A French,
I'm surprised nobody
Canadian sport.
Lacrosse.
Lacrosse. Fiona guesses lacrosse in the live chat. It's not a bad.
Yes, well, I went for.
That's not a bad guess. It is actually Canada's national sport, so it's not a bad guess. It is from hockey. It's the Canadian rules hockey.
I said ice hockey.
Okay,
Yeah.
well then you get a half point. So what is it? What's the foul itself? What would you have done that would have had you ejected?
You
from the
hit
game?
someone.
I know what it is.
You hit someone on the leg or something
No,
with your stick.
you raise your hockey stick 6 inches above someone's shoulder or something.
No, high. That's high sticking. Either both the same in English and in French. This one is say butt ending or giving them 6 inches.
You hit someone with your hockey stick.
You're allowed to hit with your hockey stick. There are 2 parts you're not allowed to use. You're allowed to use the blade, not the heel. You're allowed to use the shaft, as long as you don't separate your hands and hit them with the shaft in between your hands. As long as you hold it like this or do it one-handed, you're allowed to hit with the. You're allowed to hit a guy with a stick. That's actually a real thing in Canadian hockey. Other countries don't let you hit with the stick. Here you can, but there's only 2 parts of the stick you can't use.
The butt.
Somebody
the
says
back.
checking. Somebody
There's the
asks
back of the
checking. Checking's part of the game, man. That's just what you do. There's stick
The
checks.
end of the stick.
The end of the stick, the so-called butt end of the stick. The stick that you hold under your glove on this side with the big ball of tape on the end of it. If you get in the corners, you'll sometimes give a guy, give him 6 with the butt end of the stick. Hit him under the rib cage, try to get in around the armor, and it hurts like you wouldn't believe. And so several years ago, they made a rule against it. You're allowed to hit him with the shaft of the stick. You're allowed to hit him with the blade, but not the heel. And no, cross-checking, Rod. Cross-checking is a different thing. That's when you hit him. You're allowed to hit him with the shaft, but not if you put your hands on either side and then score him. Oh, my camera's not on for some reason. It was a moment ago. But no, the giving him 6 inches. I bring that up because we were talking before about the rule of thumb and so forth, and that's actually. Somebody says, I never realized how gay ice hockey was. The fact that you have to have a rule that specifies how you're allowed to hit another player with your stick, and that you can't drive your the butt end of the stick in between his ribs.
I mean, this is why ice hockey is ridiculous to me. It just seems more of a fight. There's no artistry in it. I mean, do the Canadians play football?
It's beautiful. It's gladiatorial. My camera did
it's just
turn
a
off.
battle. Do you play football?
I have to totally disagree with you, Rumpus. I don't watch a lot of ice hockey, but I think that the bits that I have seen display an absolutely extraordinary degree of skill. To move around on ice skates and turn and spin and to make the passes that they do and to
and you're colliding with people while you do it.
Yeah.
Everything's focused on the puck. And even the idea of checking. Now, people think checking means to collide with somebody. It doesn't. There's lots of different types of checking, including stick checking. And then there's body checking. Now, cross-checking is illegal. Now that my camera's on, I'll show you what I mean. If you hit somebody with your stick, you can do it this way. But if you put your hands on either side and you score them with that space of the shaft in between your hands, that you can't do. And you also can't drive the stick upward with the butt end or chop with the heel of it. But the actual play is exquisite. It's like there are moments of it that is more delicate than fencing. Like you'll get into a corner and he'll get his stick on the puck, and you instead of going for the puck, you'll slide your stick under and just give his stick a little lift up, and then trap the puck and slide it out backwards. It's just subtle little gesture. It's a beautiful, subtle game. And at the same time, there's another guy skating up behind you who's going to hit you right in between the shoulder blades with his shoulder and drive you into the glass. You know, it's a beautiful mix.
Answer me this question though, Hogtie. I love all sports, and as I say, I don't mind watching ice hockey because some of the skills are extraordinary. But who in their right mind would choose to be a goalkeeper in ice hockey?
Oh, they are insulated.
I mean,
that's a tough
game.
game.
The maddest people ever. I mean,
they're covered in
these things
protection.
travel at what, 100 miles an hour or something?
Yeah,
and
they're
it's
covered.
a hard little piece
No,
of.
They're
Rumpus, no, they're
protected.
not.
They're covered in that
100
bloody armor and a face
Yeah.
mask and everything. There's no way you could hit them anywhere delicate.
Oh,
Let me tell you this.
I'll tell you a story about that, Rumpus, in a second.
Okay, well, let me tell you this. If you can throw a baseball at 90 miles an hour, you can do a slap shot at 140. And that puck has no give when it hits you, and it's got an edge. At least the ball is round when it hits you. That puck, when it hits you, it's hard. The goaltender wears the thickest armor on the front and nothing on the back.
Yeah, well, he should be facing. Yeah, but he's got the goal behind him.
I gotta tell you honestly, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're not. I
Rumpus,
played goal.
let me tell you.
Yep.
Let me tell you this story.
It's rough.
I used to do eskrima, which I'm not sure you'll be familiar with, but it's a Philippine, originates from the Philippines, and basically you use a about 3-foot bamboo stick to beat as best you can the crap out of your opponent, and you have very little body armor, but you do have something like a kendo mask with the grills across it. Now, when I was sparring with someone once, they actually did a straight thrust to my head, and whether it's because it was old or his bamboo stick his screamer stick was too thin, or I don't know, but this actually went through the grills and stuck like a tiny distance in front of my. Every time I blinked, I could feel the end of the stick. I came very close to losing an eye. So, even though you say they're all protected, and this thing's traveling 140 miles an hour or whatever, no, I'm sure there must be injuries to ice hockey goalkeepers.
Okay, well, the stats.
Well, it's pretty bad.
Stats.
Actually, you know what's funny? There's a one of these little Canadian vignettes thing. Like a lot of our public airwaves are owned by the government, and they produce these Canadian content vignettes. And one of them is the invention of. It's a story of the invention of the goaltender's mask. The goaltenders were the first players to get masks. Help me out. What year was it? I thought you'd know this. 1940. Somebody Google this for me. I did already get a message that it's not 140 miles an hour. As Dino Chara has the record. It's 175 kilometers an hour is the current fastest slap shot. It's nearly
about 140, almost 140.
109 miles an hour. I don't care. You hit in the face with something 109 miles an hour, you're going to forget some basic math. That's like, that's going to be a problem.
I'm using current conversion. It's 5/8, isn't it?
Yes,
so
right,
yes,
5/8,
it's over 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, so it's 109. So the invention of the goaltender's mask was it was during a game. A guy got hit in the face. The goaltender got hit in the face, and they clean him up as best they can, and then they made one for him so he could go back into the game. This wasn't something they did as an afterthought. Then we should probably put something on that guy's face. No, it was like, well, he's got an injury already. If we put him back in the game, it could make it worse if he gets hit again. So we're going to put this thing on, and that was actually that was the origin of it. It wasn't that somebody thought of ahead of time.
And
Oh, the jockstrap. Do we know that? Well, here.
I'm a bit surprised because we've had cricket for long enough in this country where you've had pads and things. I'm a bit surprised you didn't. And
Can you look up the years?
Yeah, but I'll tell you what's interesting, Rumpus. When were helmets first introduced into cricket? I would have thought it was after that, after 19. What did you say, 40 something?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think helmets were about 1970, weren't they, or so 1780s, when the West Indians were banging away with 100 mile an hour, 120 mile an hour balls.
Yeah. Anyway, there we go. That's pretty much our 2 hours up. So let's bring things to a close. There was one very brief. Let's discuss it. I'm not sure whether you're following this or not. But I saw a very disturbing headline. I don't have a picture of it to show you. And this was like within the last 2 days that Donald Trump had actually closed the gap on Hillary. So they were literally level pegging at the moment.
She's in trouble, yeah.
Yeah, which means that she's going to have to do something pretty special, or contrary to every single prediction I ever made since the get-go, Trump actually looks like it is possible that he could get into the White House.
Well, she's having problems with Sanders. I mean, she just gave a very significant speech, I think, yesterday or the day before, where she called herself a fossil or something, and she basically agreed with all the criticism of herself, and she's she's changing her tactics to be more self-critical and more open, and she's in trouble, and she's having. I mean, Bernie Sanders. I mean, it's not completely impossible, I think, for him to. These super delegates or something that they're going to play the key role in whether or not she wins were sort of devoted to her, but there's some suggestion that they might all go over to Sanders. And apparently the rally for Sanders got 10,000 people or something, and she only got 200 for this speech that she gave or something ridiculous. So Sanders has got a huge popular movement behind him, and she's in trouble.
Well, the world's in trouble if Trump gets in, I'm sure, but we'll leave that for a future discussion. I want to say to Quantum Overlord, look, I'm sorry we never got onto the issue of whether we should stay or stay in Europe or leave Europe.
Yeah, we should do that. Yeah, well, I was hoping we actually might do that. That'd be a really good one.
If I've got the dates correct, the next show is on the 21st, and the election is on the 23rd. So the next show would be a better opportunity. But what I find is absolutely fantastic. And what makes politics so much fun, I guess, is that the people who are for and the people who are against are almost exactly and have been exactly the same percentage for many months. There's been a minor fluctuation, but really there hasn't been much more than 3% between them. And I think the latest figure I looked at today was that the Leave was like 1% up on the Remain.
Yeah.
So
was that a telephone poll or an online poll?
This is from the BBC website.
Their tracker, yeah. Was that an online poll though? That's the key thing, because all the online polls are for Leave and all the telephone polls are for staying, which is confusing these pollsters like mad. It's driving them bonkers, this difference.
Yeah. I have to say, I suspect that the vote will be for Remain.
Wow, Quantum Overlord says it was a phone poll for Leave. That is a first. Wow, that's significant. That is significant. That is very significant. That could be the turning point. That's the very first time. So I think I would disagree with you, Hogtie, because they've had 10% leads on the phone polls on the Remain until recently. So if this is a 3-point phone poll lead, that is a big change.
Well, Quantum, as I say, I apologise for not getting you on this show. We'll get you on the next show, and it will be one of the topics for discussion. How about that? But as I say, we're up to the 2-hour mark. Thank you all very much for your patience in the delay in the start of the programme. As I say, I can say for once it was not my fault. And hopefully we'll see you all in a couple of weeks' time. Is there anything anyone wants to say before I close things down?
Well, I got to do my corrections now because I'm getting the messages. So
Okay.
people are telling me Jacques Plant was the goaltender that I was thinking of. His career started in '47, shortly afterwards when he was doing. He actually had this mask developed for practices, and then he got injured in the game, so they went and they grabbed his practice goaltender mask and he put it on. Okay, so I get stuff wrong. So Canadians are telling me, "Oh, you're wrong on the Canadian history." So the thing about the assisted end of life thing that you were talking about. I forgot the term for it now. Assisted
dying.
Assisted dying is the term I'm looking for. That was the bill that was under debate in the Canadian Parliament last month or 6 weeks ago or whatever it was, when it was getting towards a deadline for voting, and the Conservatives were voting by whip, a term I won't explain for the Americans' benefit. Who cares? Doesn't matter. The party whip needed to be at a certain place on the floor. He was standing in the aisle amidst a group of people. Our young, adorable Canadian Prime Minister walked over to escort him by the elbow. In pulling him over, Trudeau hit Brasso, a New Democratic backbencher, one of their members, hit her in the boob. And it started a national scandal because the Prime Minister had elbowed somebody during a parliamentary proceeding, and there was even an inquiry, which I learned recently has now been cancelled. So when you guys were talking about what your parliament would have to do about assisted dying legislation, I made the wisecrack. It's not going to go through unless your prime minister is ready to start throwing elbows. I didn't get any laughs for it, but I bet you one or two Canadians watching the show thought it was hilarious. But there you go. So there's my
On that note,
Oh, and
final
my
thoughts.
final thing. One last thing. The news that the ISIS chappie who was videoed trading Yazidi women, and the Daily Mail reported, has now been caught by the Iraqi authorities, and goodness knows what's going to happen to him. But I bloody well hope he gets made a slave or something. Jesus bastard.
all right, on that bombshell, thank you very much, Quantum. Yes, we'll stick around for a bit. We'll bring you in. But for everyone else, we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. And as I say, make the most of that next show, because after that, the nights start drawing in. I don't want to be a pessimist, but I hate winter. All right. Thank you very much indeed. See you in 2 weeks.